um, adding our presenter here. So I'm going to go ahead and present myself. Um, so let's see here. So hi, thanks for coming today. My name is Megan French, and I am the founder of Lotus Growth. Today we're going to go over board meeting data, what every marketing executive should know. So just so everyone knows, you'll be in listen-only mode during the webinar, and we will have time for questions at the end. So you can type them into the chat box during the webinar, and we'll get to them at the end. So just a little bit about myself. I am the founder and CEO of Lotus Growth, like I said. I have an extensive background in generating revenue for B2B clients and helping executives prepare and excel for board meetings. And I've also spent years sort of trying to tackle the challenges we'll be talking about in today's presentation. And just a little bit about Lotus Growth. We're a boutique demand generation services and solution provider for B2B tech companies inside and outside of Silicon Valley. We take an integrated approach to demand generation, optimizing content, campaigns, technology, and testing, and we do whatever it takes to generate revenue for our clients. So now I will go ahead and get started with our presentation. So the primary challenge that we're going to be looking at today is full funnel attribution, because it's a big challenge in prepping for board meetings. So I'm going to ask you a question. When you're in your board meetings that are coming up soon, do you think you'll be ready to present transparent data about your marketing and sales funnels? So the concept of full funnel attribution is relatively simple. And what we're talking about here is when you have a bunch of online traffic and leads coming in from various sources like paid search and organic search and advertising, when you actually close that deal in your CRM, like Salesforce, do you actually know where those deals are coming from? And can you actually present that information at a board meeting so that the board knows which channels have the highest ROI? And the problem is that the implementation of this is anything but simple, and it's a sort of continuing challenge for a lot of the clients that we work with. So we'll go through how to fix these problems today, as well as what board members most want to see in board presentations, and then how to get buy-in for your marketing programs. So we are going to look at two primary business models today. Online versus offline models. So I have just picked out some examples of common online and offline businesses, so you guys will sort of know what I'm talking about. The first model is where the business model is completed almost entirely or entirely online. It's an online transaction only. It's mostly self-serve, where you can complete your conversion to customer almost entirely online without ever having to actually talk to a salesperson. And the second kind of business model, which I think is a little bit more common in B2B, is offline, where the lead generation and some of the sales enablement content may be online, but the bulk of the sales cycle is completed offline with a sales representative. And these deals tend to be, selling to enterprises and larger companies, because it's often longer sales cycles. So let's talk a little bit about how attribution is different for both of these sales cycles. So in business models where the transaction is completed mostly offline, it's really difficult to track the lead source past the lead stage. So you may know where all of your leads are coming from, because that's relatively easy to capture in things like Google Analytics. But then once these leads move further down the sales cycle and become customers, you may not actually know where your customers come from. And that makes it really difficult to make decisions about marketing programs or present data in board meetings. And then the second business model, which is online transactions, it's often really difficult after someone becomes a customer. So often with these business models, the customers that you retain the longest are the ones who are most valuable. So if I ask you, where are your customers that you've had for 2 years, which channels did they come from? Would you be able to answer that question? And the answer for most clients, most companies, is probably no. So we're going to go and look at some of these problems today. So the first step here is discovering blind spots. You really can't report to the board what you can't see for yourself. And this is not an uncommon problem. This is something I see with all of the clients that we work with. And if we look here at sort of a sample of data, often when I start working with clients, when we see, okay, let's dump out all of your marketing qualified leads or opportunities from the last quarter and see where they come from, it's not uncommon that 50% of their data is unknown, that they just have no idea where a lot of those leads come from. And this essentially is like a black box of data where you just don't know what your marketing spend should be or where these people came from. So it's really, really difficult for the board or for you to make decisions about your marketing if you don't know which campaigns and which channels are sending you those leads. So there's sort of some fundamental problems with why we have missing data in marketing automation in the first place. And that has to do with that there are sort of fundamental differences between the way that marketing automation works and digital marketing best practices. That makes it sort of that both of those disciplines are kind of at odds with each other at any given time, even though marketing automation will tell you that it's in line with digital marketing best practices. It's often not. So the first reason is marketing automation tracks leads by asset or call to action, not source channel. So what that means is you can drill down your leads by the white paper they converted off of or the call to action they converted off of, like a demo request, but you don't actually know what source channel they converted from, if they converted from organic or an event or paid advertising, and so that is a big challenge. The second challenge is that marketing automation has a hard time tracking source channels automatically, so that leaves a lot of manual work for marketers to do. The third reason is that marketing automation often tracks first touch, not last touch attribution. And what that means is a touch is like the first time that someone got into your funnel and interacted with your marketing at all. And last touch is the last marketing that they interacted with before they became an opportunity or closed deal. So this is really challenging for companies with long sales cycles. So if someone came into your funnel and became a lead 2 years ago but didn't convert to an opportunity until yesterday, where they came from 2 years ago is less important than the marketing that they interacted with yesterday or last week. And often marketing automation just does not track that at all. So we're going to go and sort of dive in how to fix some of these attribution problems so that you have more transparent data, more data for your board meetings. So let's look into implementing source channel attribution so you can make solid decisions about your marketing spend and strategy. And this is sort of the first step to getting more transparent data. So we're going to get a little bit in the weeds, and I know that it's complicated, but it's also important to sort of understand how to implement attribution in your marketing automation so that you have more transparent data. So the first step here is diagnostics. It's pulling out all of your data, probably from the last quarter, or if you have a lot of it, last 30 days, to see what sort of is in that black box category, what you can't see. And often data hides sort of in your marketing automation system. So dump out everything that you have and just see what's there. And then the second step is to discover what you don't have. And how do you know what you can't see? And the answer to that is maybe looking at what are the campaigns that you have run in the last quarter that you suspect that you probably have conversions from, but you just don't see it in your marketing automation because it's part of the 50% unknown. And then from there, to start filling in that information, you have to fill in tracking with UTMs, and we'll dive a little bit more into this to help your marketing automation segment by channel sources. Essentially what you have to do is give your automation some data on the URL so that it knows sort of which bucket to put a lead into or a marketing qualified lead into. And then the fourth and final step is to create source programs in your automation that will sync to Salesforce and pull that information all the way into Salesforce. So we're going to dive a little bit more into the weeds to sort of explain what I'm talking about here. So for those of you who don't know, this is the anatomy of a UTM. In Marketo, they're called query strings, but essentially it's the same thing. And what you're doing here is you're appending your URLs with some information so that your marketing automation knows where these leads are coming from. And then essentially what you're doing in your marketing automation, again, this is a screen share from Marketo, but it's essentially the same thing no matter what your marketing automation is, to say, okay, if the source is Google, the campaign is branded, and the medium is PPC, then put it into this bucket. And this essentially is an example of a UTM that would be on a paid AdWords campaign, for example. And then the second step with setting up programs is saying, okay, everything that meets that criteria, mark it as online advertising. So then you have a program or a campaign in your marketing automation that can be synced with Salesforce, and we'll dive a little bit more into this. So some general tips for implementing attribution in your marketing automation. You want to standardize and track your UTMs by source channel. Put them all in a Google Doc so you have consistency across channels. So for example, for every AdWords campaign you have, you probably want to mark medium as PPC because then it makes your reporting infinitely easier if everything is standardized. And the next really important point is that UTMs are not retroactive, meaning it can't go back and look at data before you implement them. So you want to implement them as soon as possible in the quarter so that you have as much data filled in by the time you get to your board meetings as possible. And then the third tip I have is to not get too granular with your source channel programs. You want to break down your programs enough so that they're useful for the executive team, but not so much that they're like super cumbersome for the people who are creating them. So for the executive team, probably what's really important is that they know, which leads or opportunities came from paid versus organic, or if you have different budgets for different marketing channels, you probably want to break it out by what the budget is, because then you can track the ROI more easily. So let's move on to the next thing. So we're going to look at data transparency now and board meeting prep. Why is it so important to put all of this effort and energy into attribution? So just at a top level, what do the board members want to see? They want to see top-level at-a-glance data that is most important for the quarter. So doing lots of graphics and stuff like that can be really useful in your presentations to showing at-a-glance data. And then the second step is wanting to show a retrospective on the initiatives from last quarter and report on what worked and what didn't. So what did you go over in last quarter's board meeting, and what are your findings from that? And then in light of last quarter, give an overview of future initiatives. So in my experience, what board members most want to see is how are you going to iterate on the successes from last quarter? And what is your sort of line of thought as a marketing leader to build on what is working. So not necessarily a random idea, but your reasons why you want to try something new based on evidence from what you learned in the last quarter. So let's dive now more into board meeting metrics. And I will share this deck after the webinar with all of you. So you will be able to look at this more closely because I know it's a lot of information. So for all business models, board members generally want to see web traffic and traffic sources. This is pretty easy and can be pulled from analytics. They also want to see return on marketing spend and your cost per acquisition by source. And depending on your business model, this is a slightly different terminology. In longer sales cycles, that's often just called cost per customer. They want to know the total cost that it costs to get a new contract or a new deal. For 100% online transactions, you want to look at new customers by source, and then new bookings versus churn, and the lifetime value of a customer. So for online transactions, like we were saying before, often the most important metric is how long your customers stick around, because those are the most valuable ones. So minimizing that churn percentage is really important, and increasing the lifetime value of your customers. And then for offline transactions, try to go as far down the funnel as you can and map those out by source. So marketing qualified leads or opportunities by source, so that your board can understand the conversion rate by source. Maybe some campaigns are way more successful than others. So maybe you want to put more money into, say, SEO and organic. You want to be able to show, what you're going to do next quarter to sort of minimize the cost per customer, cost per acquisition. And then the second one here is new or renewed customers, or new or renewed contracts, and then average customer value, which is sort of the flip side of these metrics here. How is your average customer value grown over time, and how are you retaining the customers that you already have? And again, there may be more depending on your business model. This is just sort of general metrics for two primary business models. And I will say that ROI on marketing programs and campaigns is the single most important metric you can show. But as any marketer knows, ROI can be surprisingly hard to calculate. In an ideal world, the data that you have for ROI would be self-evident, but there are three primary reasons why this is actually really difficult. The first reason is long sales cycles. If you have a sales cycle that is 2 years or 1 year, how do you actually calculate marketing spend versus profit for that particular deal? And then the second is different owners of the data. Often CMOs or CFOs are the ones who are tracking revenue, and the directors, for example, are in charge of campaigns and sources. And so it's really hard for directors when they aren't given full transparency into the revenue to sort of calculate that ROI. And then the third that we've already sort of talked about at length is incomplete attribution, that you don't actually know where your leads are coming from, so you can't calculate ROI. So I'm going to go a little bit further into how to get buy-in for your marketing programs, and that has to do a lot with ROI. So I once had a VP tell me, if it's not in Salesforce, it doesn't exist. And that can be a little bit demoralizing for marketers who are doing like the hard work with the data and analytics every single day, to just have their work sort of thrown away if it doesn't make its way up to Salesforce. And what I have found in my experience is often there's a fundamental difference between where the executive team and, say, the CFO are reporting from, aka Salesforce or an internal database, and where marketing teams are actually reporting from, which is often analytics or marketing automation. And so what we want to try to do to get buy-in for our marketing programs is align these these different sources as much as possible and get as much information as possible into Salesforce so that CFOs, CMOs can be making educated decisions when allocating budget for future marketing initiatives. So now we're back to the funnel in board meetings and why this is so very important. So often what happens in Salesforce is you have this one overarching category. You have all these different channels, but once it gets to Salesforce, it's just marked as website or inbound lead. And that really doesn't do anyone any good. And when you have all these question marks and you have unknown data in Salesforce, then you're not going to get buy-in for your marketing programs if you can't show exactly which sources are producing revenue. So connecting source channel and campaigns to revenue is what will get you buy-ins. So which of these channels are producing deals and opportunities and which have the best ROI? And if you can show that in the systems that your marketing executives are reporting from and making decisions from, then you're going to get buy-in. And that's why all of that attribution work that we've done at the beginning of the presentation and we do with our clients at the beginning of the quarter is really, really important, because if you can show ROI on marketing programs, then you're going to get as much money as you want for that. So yeah, here, if you can show ROI in Salesforce, you'll get buy-in. And then the question becomes, how do we actually do that? And the first step is to sync your source channel campaigns in your marketing automation with similar channel campaigns in Salesforce, so that your executive team can see which channels, aka organic versus paid versus events, are actually producing revenue in Salesforce. And then you also want to show return the furthest down the sales cycle as you can. So if you have a long sales cycle, you may not have revenue yet in Salesforce, but if you can show opportunities being created from a particular source or a particular campaign, then you'll get buy-in. Or if you can show marketing qualified leads, then you'll get buy-in. And the third most important point is to share your data internally. So spend, revenue, etc. Share it with each other, share it with the marketing team, because then you can get more accurate reporting and better ROI on your campaigns. So that's pretty much it, but I just want to share with you that we have some custom solutions for board meeting prep and attribution, like what we've talked about today. If you're still feeling kind of scared about your board meetings and need some help pulling all that information out of your marketing automation and prepping your slides for board meetings, we absolutely do that. And then we also have custom solutions and services to help you figure out your attribution so that that black box data, 50% unknown data, we can start filling that in with your campaigns and sources and pass that data to Salesforce so that you can get buy-in for your marketing campaigns. So if you're interested in any of that, you can go to our website, which is lotusgrowth.co, or you can contact me directly at megan@lotusgrowth.co. So thank you very much for your time today. And I think we have a couple of questions to go over. So let me see here. Okay, so the first question is, when should we start implementing full funnel attribution? So as I went over in the presentation, as soon as possible. A lot of this data, like I was saying, is not retroactive. So if you can get it done as close to the beginning of the quarter as possible, you will have the most complete data. And then the second question here is, what's the best way to track the sources of my customers if I have a 100% online business and the transaction is completed online and I don't use Salesforce? So the answer to that question, if you don't use Salesforce, is to do as much in Google Analytics as you can. There are custom dimensions and custom parameters that you can create so you can track goals and retention further down the sales funnel and know where those leads are actually coming from. So even if you don't use Salesforce, there's a lot you can do in marketing automation and analytics. Okay, I think that's all of our questions for today. I'll just stay on for 1 or 2 more minutes here to see if any other questions sort of pop in. But thank you very much for your attention. And like I said, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I will send out the presentation and this recording after the fact, probably sometime today or tomorrow, so you will have it for reference. Thanks so much, and have a good rest of your day.